The beginning of the Theses plan. The quiet hum of peace that had settled over the galaxy was now just a memory. For years, humanity had been an example of diplomatic grace, scientific prowess, and peaceful exploration. After their ascension to the Galactic Council, the humans had shown that even the most dangerous of death-world races could evolve beyond their primitive origins. They were not conquerors, but builders, engineers of peace, protectors of knowledge, and allies to all races. Yet this image of humanity would soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. It began with the Tessi, an ancient and proud empire with the strength to rival any in the galaxy. Their history was one of dominance, their technology far surpassing most, and their civilization built upon the belief that the law of the strongest was the only law worth following. For centuries, they had remained unchallenged, their power unassailable. But the rise of humanity had begun to unsettle the balance they had carefully crafted. Humanity's rapid advancement and peaceful nature posed a subtle yet undeniable threat to their empire's hegemony. The Tessi had long believed that only through complete control of resources and territories could they guarantee their future dominance. And the Sol system, rich in untapped resources and home to a dangerous death-world species, stood directly in their path. The human race had little understanding of the Tessi's true intentions, unaware that their peaceful existence was on the verge of being destroyed. When the Tessi Empire moved to seize control of the Sol system, it was clear to the Galactic Council that this was not a simple territorial dispute. The Tessi's move was not just a political maneuver. It was an invasion. However, the Tessi knew exactly how to manipulate the system to their advantage. They presented their case with a cold, calculated argument that was impossible to refute under the Council's laws. The humans, the Tessi ambassador stated with chilling calm, pose a direct threat to our empire's future. The humans had been peaceful and cooperative since their arrival on the galactic stage, but the Tessi had spun a web of deceit to label them as a threat. By leveraging years of intelligence gathering and exploiting the galactic treaties, they framed humanity's growing influence as an imminent danger to the status quo. The other races in the Council were split. While many sympathized with humanity's plight, the laws of the Council were clear. The Tessi were within their rights to protect their borders, even if the humans had not once made an aggressive move toward them. To the Tessi, the humans' peaceful nature was a sign of weakness, and their strength lay in their military prowess. In their eyes, the humans had achieved too much too quickly, and their strategic position at the edge of Tessi territory made them a liability. If left unchecked, they could become a future obstacle to the Tessi's dominance in the galaxy. When the objections from other races came in, the Tessi simply dismissed them. The spirit of the law is not our concern, they argued. The letter of the law is our guiding principle. The Tessi were well versed in exploiting legal loopholes, and this time they had crafted a masterful argument that made it impossible for the Galactic Council to prevent their actions. Their logic was flawless, their manipulation impeccable. What could the Council do? The law had to be upheld, even if it meant that humanity would soon be under the boot of an empire that cared nothing for peace. Humanity watched in horror as the debate raged on. Their fate, as it seemed, was sealed. The declaration of war against them was not just a political maneuver, it was a calculated preemptive strike. The humans, despite their remarkable achievements and history of peace, were now faced with an existential crisis. The Council, once a place of unity, had failed them. Humanity had become a pawn in a game far beyond their control. For the humans, the situation was dire. Though they had become known for their military brilliance, the reality of their position was sobering. With fewer than 20 billion people and a limited history in galactic affairs, they were no match for the Tessi Empire's sheer numbers. The Tessi numbered in the trillions and had been among the stars for over 1,000 years. Their technology was far beyond anything the humans had ever seen, and the thought of facing such a formidable enemy was overwhelming. Even the most optimistic of military tacticians knew that a war against the Tessi, no matter how well planned, would likely result in disaster. Yet there was something about humanity that the Tessie had miscalculated, something they did not fully understand. Humans, though outnumbered, were far from weak. They had survived wars on their home planet, traversed vast stretches of space, and discovered ways to turn adversity into opportunity. For all their advancements, the Tessie had never truly comprehended what it meant to be human. What made humanity so resilient was their ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and to innovate when faced with impossible odds. The Tessie underestimated that. In the Galactic Council chambers, tension was thick in the air. While many races sat in silence, others, like the Arasa, exchanged furtive glances. The Arasa, an ancient race known for their technological expertise and advanced intellect, had once ruled the galaxy, their empire the most prosperous the Milky Way had ever known. But their fall from grace had been swift, brought about by a scandalous secret that had torn their empire apart. The Arasa were no strangers to the dark side of galactic politics, and they knew the Tessie's manipulations all too well. The humans were not just victims, they were being used as pawns in a larger game, one that the Tessie had been playing for centuries. But the Arasa ambassador, who had seen the downfall of their own people, did not sit idly by. They could not, in good conscience, allow the humans to be sacrificed for political convenience. When they stood to speak, their words carried weight. "We cannot allow this injustice to stand," they said, their voice steady and unwavering. "The Tessie may have manipulated the law, but we, the Council, have the power to act." However, the Council speaker, in his wisdom, reminded everyone that the law was the foundation of the galaxy's peace. The argument became more heated, but the Tessie remained calm, knowing they had won the legal battle. The humans, on the other hand, faced an uncertain future, their peaceful nature now seen as a threat rather than an asset. As the debate continued, a quiet realization settled among the humans. This was no longer just a diplomatic crisis. The survival of their species was at stake, and their enemies were not going to back down. They would need to rise to the occasion, not as diplomats or peacekeepers, but as warriors. If they were to survive, they would need to adapt, fight, and show the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. Despite the overwhelming odds, General Eric Draven, a seasoned strategist, refused to accept defeat. His mission was clear: prepare humanity for the war that was already upon them. No matter the cost, humanity would fight for its survival. They had no other choice. The war begins, humanity's resolve. The moment the Tessie Empire made their declaration, humanity's world shifted from one of peaceful diplomacy to one of harsh, unrelenting reality. The Council's failure to act left the humans with no choice but to face a galaxy-threatening enemy alone. The Tessie had prepared for this day for centuries, and they believed their victory was a mere formality. But they had not anticipated the unyielding resolve of the human spirit. General Eric Draven, a seasoned strategist with a long history of leading humanity's forces through smaller skirmishes, now found himself facing the greatest challenge of his life. The Tessie, with their overwhelming numbers and superior technology, seemed unbeatable. But General Draven knew something the Tessie had overlooked. Humanity was a people forged in adversity, and in adversity they thrived. The first days after the declaration of war were filled with panic, uncertainty, and disbelief. The news hit humanity hard. From the highest levels of government to the most humble of civilians, there was an air of shock. Humanity had not been more hardened in over 100 years. The scars of their previous conflicts had long healed, replaced by a focus on diplomacy, trade, and scientific discovery. Few had ever anticipated the galaxy turning against them in such a brutal way. But it was in these darkest hours that the true strength of humanity emerged. In every corner of human civilization, people rallied to the cause. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and civilians alike poured their knowledge, skills, and energy into preparing for the war that was now inevitable. The crisis brought out the best in them, uniting them under a singular purpose: Survival. As the human fleet prepared for battle, a small group of diplomats, led by Ambassador Nora Mathis, continued to push for peace. They had little hope of convincing the Tesi to back down, but they were determined to try. Mathis knew the odds were stacked against her, but she also understood the value of dialogue. She sought to rally other races in the galaxy to their cause, hoping to create a coalition that could help prevent the destruction of humanity. Yet the Tesi were methodical and brutal. Their propaganda spread throughout the galaxy, painting humanity as the aggressor, twisting facts to suit their narrative. While some races hesitated to take a side, others, like the Arasa, were quick to express their support for humanity. The Arasa had once been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, and their fall had been a lesson in the dangers of arrogance and unchecked power. They despised the Tesi, knowing all too well how ruthless they could be, and the Arasa leadership was secretly negotiating with humanity for military support. The diplomatic efforts, however, seemed to be a distant hope. The battlefront was already heating up, and humanity had no time to waste. General Draven had already begun deploying his forces, although they were vastly outnumbered. The human fleet, though technologically impressive, was a fraction of the size of the Tesis. However, humanity's edge lay not in numbers, but in innovation and adaptability. For all their might, the Tesi had grown complacent, relying on brute strength and advanced weaponry rather than ingenuity. The first engagement came swiftly. The Tesi launched an overwhelming attack on a human outpost near the Sol system, where the first major conflict would unfold. The humans had prepared, but nothing could fully prepare them for the sheer ferocity of the Tesi assault. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the cold vacuum of space. Yet even in the chaos, human commanders were already making critical decisions, using the Tesi's overconfidence against them. General Draven's strategy was simple yet bold. He would use the Tesi's predictable tactics to create traps, forcing them into positions where they could be outmaneuvered. The Tesi had relied on their superior firepower, but humanity's military forces had developed strategies focused on mobility and precision. The human fleet was smaller but faster, and their ships were equipped with advanced cloaking devices and high-powered disruptors that could target weak points in the Tesi vessels. The first strike, though successful, came at a high cost. The Tesi had underestimated the human resolve. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But the Tesi were not prepared for the humans' ability to adapt on the fly. They had anticipated a conventional fight, one where sheer strength would win the day. What they had not expected was a guerrilla-style war, one where human ingenuity would find creative solutions to every obstacle. Despite the early success, the war had only just begun. The Tesi regrouped quickly, determined to crush the human resistance before it could spread. However, the humans, though outgunned, had something the Tesi lacked: the ability to think beyond conventional warfare. The Tesi had relied too heavily on their advanced weaponry and military doctrine, but they had not factored in the one thing that could bring them down: the human spirit. Ambassador Mathis, though far from the front lines, continued her diplomatic work tirelessly. While many in the Galactic Council had already accepted the Tesi's version of events, Mathis knew that humanity's survival depended on swaying more races to their side. She worked with the Arasa, seeking to create a more formal alliance, and reached out to several smaller factions who had long resented the Tesi's dominance. The diplomatic landscape was shifting, but the humans' true strength would soon be tested on the battlefield. The Tesi launched another attack, this time on a civilian colony near the edge of human space. The goal was clear: to break the human will by targeting their civilians, hoping to provoke fear and surrender. But the Tesi had underestimated humanity's resilience. As the attack unfolded, the people of the colony, along with their military forces, fought back with everything they had. It was a brutal, desperate battle, but in the end, the humans held their ground, protecting their families and proving to the galaxy that they would not be intimidated. This act of defiance, though costly, sent a powerful message. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were fighting for their future. Across the galaxy, other races began to take notice. The Tessie, for all their power, were not invincible. They had made a grave miscalculation in thinking humanity would simply fold. They had underestimated the one force that no empire, no matter how vast or powerful, could easily defeat: the will of an entire species fighting for survival. As the war escalated, both sides dug in for a long and costly conflict. The Tessie Empire, with its massive fleet and overwhelming numbers, began to lose ground as the humans implemented new strategies and technological innovations. The humans had made their stand. They had shown the galaxy that they would not be silenced, that their determination to survive could not be extinguished. The battle for humanity's future had just begun, and there was no turning back. The unseen hand, humanity's strategic awakening. As the war between humanity and the Tessie raged on, the initial shock of the Tessie's declaration of war began to wear off, and humanity's true resolve began to show itself. The Tessie, confident in their overwhelming numbers and advanced technology, had underestimated the ingenuity that had carried humanity through centuries of survival. They were not fighting just an enemy. They were facing a species that had thrived against all odds, a species that had learned to adapt, evolve, and ultimately triumph when cornered. The first wave of human resistance had been chaotic, but filled with raw determination. General Eric Draven, despite the overwhelming odds, had found a way to make the Tessie feel the sting of their arrogance. Through clever tactics, guerrilla warfare, and an unparalleled capacity for innovation, humanity had struck fear into the heart of the Tessie. But the war was far from over. The Tessie, once shaken, began to regroup and strategize for a swift victory. They were a species bred for conquest, and they did not take lightly to the idea that anyone, especially humans, could challenge their authority. On the human side, there was a feeling of hope beginning to take root. Though their numbers were few compared to the billions in the Tessie Empire, humanity's ability to think outside the box was their greatest weapon. It was no longer just about brute strength. It was about survival, adaptation, and creating solutions to problems no one else would have thought possible. One of the greatest breakthroughs came from a team of human engineers who, under extreme pressure, managed to reverse engineer a Tessie communications relay they had captured during one of the early skirmishes. This technology, once understood, gave humans the ability to decrypt Tessie military strategies and understand their movements. It was a game changer. Information was power, and humanity had now gained an edge. This new advantage allowed the human fleet to outmaneuver the Tessie at critical junctures, turning what seemed like certain defeats into surprising victories. The tide was beginning to shift, and for the first time since the war had started, the humans began to feel a glimmer of hope. At the heart of this human resurgence was General Eric Draven. While the Tessie held their power through sheer force, Draven and his commanders had been able to turn the tables using the human knack for improvisation. He had long believed that the human military was not meant to win by strength alone, but by cleverness and strategy. And this belief was now paying off in ways he had only dreamed of. His soldiers were no longer just fighting. They were thinking, learning, and evolving. Draven's leadership was beginning to inspire a new kind of soldier, one who was more than a mere instrument of war. They were becoming tacticians, scientists, and engineers all at once. The Tessie, however, had not underestimated the humans for long. The first few months of conflict were filled with costly skirmishes as humanity learned to adapt to the Tessie's superior technology. But the Tessie Empire was nothing if not relentless. After suffering numerous setbacks, they sent their elite forces to deal with the human threat once and for all. These were not just soldiers. They were the best of the Tessie military, a crack team known as the Vangrath, a force feared by all who knew of them. The Vangrath were relentless, merciless, and known for their expertise in infiltration, sabotage, and precision strikes. When the Vangrath arrived at the heart of the human defense, they launched an assault so vicious it nearly broke the human resistance. They attacked with precision, their ships designed for stealth and speed, outpacing anything the humans could muster. For a moment, it seemed that humanity's newfound momentum would be crushed. But General Draven knew that it was not just about fighting the enemy. It was about outsmarting them. He had expected this. He had anticipated the Tasi's next move and had prepared a counterattack using the very tactics that had led to humanity's initial successes. Instead of fighting the Vangrath head-on, the humans decided to let them come to them. Using their superior knowledge of the local space terrain and clever tactics, the humans led the Vangrath into a trap. A series of small, seemingly insignificant outposts, those the Tesi thought were easy prey, had been strategically placed to lure the elite forces in. As the Vangrath advanced, the humans activated a network of decoys and traps that caused chaos within the Tesi ranks. The Vangrath, despite their reputation for precision, were caught off guard. The human forces, though greatly outnumbered, turned the tables in a brilliant series of ambushes and sabotage missions, leading to a stunning victory. It was a moment that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Tesi had been forced to retreat in disarray, unable to cope with the unexpected tactics of the humans. The victory was not just a military one. It was a psychological blow to the Tesi Empire. For the first time in the war, the Tesi realized that the humans were not merely a small, weak race. They were a force to be reckoned with, one that could challenge their empire on a strategic level. However, the human victory did not come without a price. The losses on both sides were immense. The human fleet, though victorious, had suffered tremendous damage. Key stations and outposts were destroyed, and countless lives had been lost in the heat of battle. But the humans were not defeated. They had proven that they could stand their ground, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. They had shown the galaxy that, despite the overwhelming power of the Tesi, the human spirit could not be crushed. General Draven, though exhausted, felt the weight of his decisions. He knew that the victory over the Vangrath was only the beginning. The Tesi would not relent. They would return stronger and more determined. The humans could not afford to rest on their laurels. The war had just escalated, and it was clear that the future of humanity depended on their ability to continue innovating, adapting, and fighting with every ounce of strength they had. As the human forces regrouped and rebuilt, they continued to push forward, knowing that the cost of peace would be steep. The Tesi had underestimated them, but humanity had now proven that it was no easy target. The war was far from over, and the galaxy was about to witness something that had never been seen before. A war fought not only with weapons, but with brains, hearts, and an unbreakable resolve. As Ambassador Nora Mathis continued her diplomatic efforts, rallying support from any race that would listen, humanity's leaders began to focus on the long-term strategy. They knew that the Tesi were not just fighting for resources, they were fighting for control. And for humanity, this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. The next stage of the war was coming, and humanity was ready. No longer would they be seen as the underdog. The Tesi had poked the hornet's nest, and now the humans were ready to sting. The battle for Sol, humanity's unyielding will. The war had reached a critical point. Humanity had been tested on every front, pushed to the brink by the Tesi Empire's relentless assaults, yet the human spirit had not broken. The small victories were beginning to accumulate, and with each one, the humans grew bolder, more daring, and increasingly inventive. But now, the stage was set for the most important battle of all, the battle for the Sol system. It was a pivotal moment, and both sides understood that the outcome of this conflict would determine the course of the entire war. The Tesi, still reeling from the unexpected losses inflicted upon them by the Vangrath's failed assault, had begun to regroup with renewed ferocity. The Sol system, rich with resources and strategically located near key trade routes, was essential for the Tesi to solidify their dominance in the galaxy. If they could seize control of Sol, they would gain a foothold in human space that would be difficult to dislodge. The Tesi knew that this was the moment to break humanity's resolve once and for all. General Eric Draven, having watched the slow, grinding progress of humanity's resistance, knew this battle would either define their future or seal their fate. He understood that a direct confrontation with the full might of the Tessie fleet was not something humanity could survive. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and in many ways, outclassed by the Tessie's superior technology. But Draven's experience had taught him that sheer force was never the answer. Humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt, improvise, and, above all, survive. The Tessie, for all their power, lacked the flexibility and the sheer unpredictability that humanity could bring to bear. Draven began to assemble a diverse force of human and allied ships, rallying the support of the Arasa and other races who had been willing to join the human cause. Together, they formed a small but elite fleet that would strike at the heart of the Tessie's plans. Every ship, every soldier, and every engineer would have a role to play. The stakes were high, and the pressure was unimaginable, but humanity had no other choice. They could not afford to lose Sol, not now. As the human fleet approached the Sol system, the tension in the command center was palpable. It was a battle unlike any other. The human forces knew they would not be able to defeat the Tessie in a conventional fight. The Tessie's flagship, the Vanguard, was a massive, terrifying ship, its weapons capable of destroying entire fleets in a single barrage. But the human fleet, though smaller, was agile, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, and capable of striking swiftly and with precision. General Draven had a plan, an unorthodox one, but it was their only hope. The first move came at dawn. The human fleet entered the Sol system under the cover of a comet field, their ships hidden from the Tessie sensors. They would be undetectable, moving like shadows in the dark. It was a risky strategy, one that relied heavily on precise timing and the Tessie's overconfidence. The Tessie, expecting a direct confrontation, had left their outer defenses largely unmanned, believing that humanity would hesitate before launching an assault. Draven's plan was to lure the Tessie into a false sense of security. He knew they would underestimate the human fleet. As expected, the Tessie launched their own reconnaissance ships, confident that the humans would be unable to hide for long. It was then that the humans made their move. In a brilliant display of coordination and strategy, the human fleet broke through the Tessie's outer defenses, striking the Tessie's supply lines and communication relays first. These targets were critical for the Tessie's long-range strategy, and by severing them, the humans threw the entire Tessie operation into disarray. The Tessie, caught off guard by the humans' unexpected strike, scrambled to defend their precious resources, but Draven knew this was only the beginning. As the battle raged, General Draven's forces unleashed a wave of surprise tactics that confounded the Tessie. They had expected human forces to fight conventionally, with direct strikes and predictable maneuvers. Instead, humanity's forces used the terrain of the Sol system itself to their advantage. They had mapped every asteroid, every moon, every comet, and every dust cloud in the system. Using the comet field as cover, human ships darted in and out of view, launching surprise attacks on Tessie convoys and then vanishing into the asteroid belt. The Tessie, unable to anticipate these unconventional tactics, began to struggle. Human pilots, trained for agility and improvisation, outmaneuvered the larger, more cumbersome Tessie ships. The smaller human ships, while less powerful, were far more nimble and difficult to target. It became clear to the Tessie that humanity was not going to fight by the rules they knew. They were facing a new kind of warfare, one based on adaptability and creativity. The humans had also brought new technology into play. A breakthrough in energy shielding technology, developed by a coalition of human engineers and allied scientists, allowed the human ships to absorb more damage before being rendered ineffective. The Tessie's advanced weaponry, designed to shred through conventional shields, was rendered less effective against the new human tech. This technological edge allowed humanity to fight longer, harder, and more efficiently. The human fleet was taking hits, no doubt, but they were holding their ground. As the battle dragged on, the Tessie began to realize that they could not overwhelm humanity through sheer force alone. The Tessie began to turn their attention toward their flagship, the Vanguard, hoping to break the human resistance by targeting the core of the human fleet. But this, too, played into Draven's strategy. The Vanguard was a formidable target, and Draven knew it was only a matter of time before the Tessie would focus their entire fleet on it. What they didn't know was that the Vanguard was not the center of the human resistance. Instead, it was the decoy. The true human fleet, having hidden their most advanced weapons and ships deep within the asteroid belt, sprang into action when the Tessie least expected it. A coordinated strike on the Tessie flagship was launched, and for the first time, the Tessie felt the weight of their miscalculations. With Draven's plan in full motion, the human forces began to sabotage the Vanguard from within, attacking its weak points with surgical precision. The Tessie flagship, though still a powerful force, began to falter under the unexpected assault. The Vanguard's shields, which had been considered impenetrable, began to show signs of weakness, and its weapon systems began to malfunction. It was not the brute force of the humans that brought down the Vanguard. It was their brilliance, their ability to think beyond the battlefield, to use what they had at their disposal, and find the cracks in the Tessie's seemingly indestructible fortress. As the Vanguard finally faltered and was forced to retreat, a wave of shock ran through the Tessie fleet. The loss of their flagship was a blow to their morale, and for the first time since the war began, they felt doubt. It was a moment of triumph for humanity, and a defining moment in the conflict. But Draven knew that victory in Sol was not yet assured. The Tessie, though shaken, were far from defeated. The real war was only beginning. The human spirit prevails. The tipping point. As the smoke cleared over the Sol system and the human fleet pulled back, General Eric Draven allowed himself a rare moment of relief. The destruction of the Vanguard, the pride of the Tessie Empire, was a monumental achievement, but it was far from a decisive victory. The Tessie, despite their loss, were still a vast and technologically superior force. The war had shifted in favor of the humans for now, but the Tessie had not been entirely defeated. Humanity's struggle for survival was far from over. The humans had, for the first time, cracked the impenetrable shell of the Tessie's seemingly invincible empire. However, as General Draven knew all too well, one battle, no matter how significant, was not enough to win a war. Sol was just the beginning, and the Tessie would regroup, learn from their mistakes, and come back with renewed force. The humans had struck a blow, but there was no certainty that it would be enough to turn the tide in their favor. It was a grim reality that Draven had learned the hard way in the past. Battles were won not just through victories, but through the sacrifices made to achieve them. Meanwhile, the Tessie Empire had been shaken to its core. The destruction of the Vanguard was not only a strategic loss but a symbolic one. The flagship represented their might, their centuries of unchallenged dominance, and the core of their military operations. Its fall was a stinging blow to their pride and morale. It was the first time the Tessie realized that their centuries-long reign could be challenged. Still, they were not a species known for surrendering or retreating. In the halls of Tessie leadership, decisions were being made, decisions that would echo across the galaxy. While General Draven and his commanders prepared for the inevitable Tessie counterattack, the human forces were also engaged in a different kind of battle. They had gained a victory, but the cost was steep. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties, with several ships destroyed and many crew members lost. The morale of the humans, however, was high. The victory at Sol had not just been a victory of strategy. It had been a victory of spirit. For the first time since the war began, humanity knew that they could stand toe-to-toe with the Tessie and win. They were not just surviving. They were thriving under pressure. It was this collective strength that would be their greatest weapon moving forward. In the aftermath of the battle, the human leadership had to quickly assess their situation. While the Tessie regrouped, humanity's window of opportunity was limited. The loss of the Vanguard was a blow, but it had only made the Tessie more dangerous. The human fleet had been able to disrupt the Tesi's command structure, but it was clear that the Tesi were preparing for a large-scale retaliation. General Draven gathered his top officers and engineers, rallying them for the challenges ahead. The war had reached a tipping point. The battle for Sol had proven that humanity had the ability to face down the Tesi, but now, humanity had to turn that victory into a sustained advantage. Every moment was critical. Draven ordered his fleet to begin the long process of rebuilding and reinforcing their forces, knowing that the next confrontation with the Tesi could determine whether humanity would continue to hold its ground or be overwhelmed. Ambassador Nora Mathis, too, was hard at work. She knew that the war was not just being fought on the front lines. The political and diplomatic efforts were just as crucial. The destruction of the Vanguard had sent ripples throughout the galaxy. While some races remained hesitant, many now began to see humanity as a true contender in the fight against the Tesi. The Arasa, who had been instrumental in providing intelligence and support, continued to advocate for the human cause, rallying other factions to lend their assistance. The Tesi's manipulative tactics had been exposed, and many of the smaller races began to question their allegiance to an empire that had shown its true colors. Despite these diplomatic victories, the situation was tense. Some factions remained neutral, unwilling to take a side until they were certain of the outcome of the war. Others, like the Zorak, a warrior race known for their fierce loyalty and combat prowess, were skeptical of humanity's ability to maintain its momentum. The Zorak had witnessed humanity's victory at Sol, but they were cautious. In their eyes, the war was still in its early stages, and they were uncertain if humanity could sustain the fight against the Tesi's overwhelming resources. The human leadership knew that they could not rely solely on alliances. Humanity had to stand on its own, and they would have to continue proving their worth. Draven, now more determined than ever, began to shift the focus of his strategy. The Tesi were far from defeated. They were regrouping, adapting, and learning from their mistakes. To truly break the Tesi's will, humanity would have to strike at the heart of their empire, not just win battles. They would need to strike fear into the Tesi by showing them that their empire could be toppled, not by force, but by resilience, adaptability, and cunning. Meanwhile, the Tesi were preparing their own counteroffensive. The loss of the Vanguard had hurt them, but it had not broken them. The Tesi were a proud people, and their leadership was now more determined than ever to bring humanity to its knees. They were assembling the new fleet, larger, stronger, and more dangerous than ever before. They had learned from their previous mistakes and would not underestimate humanity again. The Tesi Empire, with all its resources and technological superiority, now realized that the war could no longer be won through conventional means alone. They would need to break humanity's spirit if they were to succeed. The Tesi began to implement more brutal tactics, sweeping through human colonies, using terror and fear to try to break the morale of the human people. They aimed to make humanity understand that resistance was futile. However, what the Tesi did not account for was the one thing they could not control: the human capacity for resilience. As the Tesi unleashed their new offensive, they underestimated the bond that had formed between humanity and its allies. The humans had proven that they would fight for each other, no matter the cost. The Tesi were a race of logic and strength, but they did not understand what made humanity so unique. Humanity had never been driven solely by logic or strength. They had been driven by their hearts. They fought not for victory, but for their future, their families, and the freedom to live as they chose. This was the human advantage, an unwavering belief in the value of life and freedom that no empire, no matter how powerful, could extinguish. As the war escalated, the resolve of humanity grew stronger. The Tesi would learn that, for all their power, they could never truly defeat the human spirit.